Have you ever given someone everything, only to realize they were quietly preparing to leave the moment they got what they wanted? My name is Noah Whitman. I'm 43, a cybersecurity consultant living in Portland. For over a decade, I thought I had a solid marriage built on shared dreams, quiet routines, and unshakable loyalty. Isabel was my wife, my compass, and for a long time, the only family I had left. 12 years together. Birthdays never forgotten. Milestones celebrated with quiet precision. I wasn't the most exciting man, but I was dependable, present, the kind of person you build a life with, or so I believed. 6 months ago, I planned an anniversary trip across Northern Europe, fjord-side dinners in Norway, glass igloo nights under Icelandic stars, and canal walks in Amsterdam. Every detail designed for her, drawn from years of conversation, casual wishes she didn't think I remembered. But on the morning of our departure, Isabel stood at the door with her luggage, and another man. Not just any man, her personal trainer. She looked me in the eyes and said, "You wouldn't enjoy a trip like this anyway." What happened next wasn't revenge. It was something colder, smarter, and far more satisfying. I met Isabel on a rainy Thursday in downtown Portland. She was curating a photography exhibit at a small gallery near the university, standing in front of a black and white portrait, explaining the tension between shadow and symmetry to a group of students. I wasn't part of the tour. I was just passing through, killing time before a client meeting. But something about her voice made me stay. It was low, confident, curious. She spoke like someone who felt things deeply but didn't show it easily. We met again 2 weeks later at a bookstore. She remembered me. I bought a photography book I didn't need just to have an excuse to talk. Within a year, we were living together. Within 2, we were married. Our life was quiet, intentional. I built a cybersecurity firm from the ground up, Whitman Digital. She ran workshops for young artists and eventually started a nonprofit to help underrepresented photographers get exposure. We weren't flashy. We didn't need to be. Dinners at home, weekend hikes, long conversations about books and politics, and the kind of life we wanted to grow into. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Or at least I thought it was. For years, I watched her pour herself into her work. She was fiercely dedicated, often staying up late preparing for community events or writing grant proposals. I was proud of her, even when it meant we barely spoke some nights. I figured love sometimes looked like parallel effort, like building in the same direction even if you weren't always in the same room. I never questioned where she was or who she was with. I'd lost both of my parents by the time I turned 25 and never really had a family of my own. Isabel became that for me, my constant, my safe place. I supported her through slow seasons, paid off the nonprofit's first venue rental myself when a sponsor fell through. I celebrated every small win like it was my own. When our 12th anniversary approached, I decided to do something big. She had always talked about seeing the northern lights, visiting Icelandic hot springs, seeing the art scene in Amsterdam. She'd once mentioned a quiet dream of floating along a Norwegian fjord, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunrise. So I spent 6 months planning it all. I booked the flights through a business travel portal I use for my high-level clients. The hotels were boutique and personal, no tourist traps. I hired a travel consultant to help me line up local experiences. A private glacier hike, a boat tour in Bergen, a dinner in a greenhouse restaurant that sources its ingredients from the surrounding mountains. I even built in time for her to explore photo exhibits in Oslo, one of her favorite cities she'd never been to. I kept it a secret. I wanted to surprise her the way she used to surprise me with handwritten notes tucked into my laptop bag or impromptu dance nights in our living room. I miss those versions of us. I thought maybe this trip could help us find our way back. She'd seemed distant lately, but I chalked it up to work stress, or maybe the slow burn of middle age. We weren't in our honeymoon phase anymore, sure, but who was after a decade? I still loved her. That much I never questioned. And I believed, perhaps naively, that the trip would remind her why she loved me too. By the time I finished planning everything, I had an entire leather-bound folder of details, boarding passes, reservations, even a Spotify playlist of her favorite songs to listen to on the flight. I imagined her face lighting up when I showed her. I imagined the quiet kind of gratitude that doesn't need to be spoken. I imagined us. Not perfect, but real again. But what I didn't imagine was how far she'd already drifted. How somewhere between gallery openings and gym sessions, between early mornings and late evenings, Isabel had started rehearsing a new life. One that didn't include me at all. The first signs were small. The kind of details you only piece together in hindsight when you're looking for patterns. At the time, I didn't see them as anything more than stress, distraction, or just the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. It started with Drew's name, her personal trainer. At first, it came up casually. She mentioned how intense his workouts were, how he pushed her harder than anyone else had, how good it felt to be challenged again. I remember smiling, encouraging her. I'd been worried about her low energy for months, and seeing her excited about something, anything, felt like a good sign. But then it kept coming up. Not just in conversations about the gym, but in completely unrelated topics. Drew says almond milk is terrible for inflammation. Drew used to live in Copenhagen. He says the food there is amazing. Drew's thinking of launching a supplement line. It went from occasional comments to a slow takeover of our conversations. She started dressing differently. Gone were the oversized sweaters and relaxed jeans. In their place, sculpted workout sets, glossy new sneakers, sleek hair tied back like she was always en route to somewhere important. I complimented her, of course. I told her she looked radiant, healthier. She brushed it off, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something unreadable. I noticed her phone habits changed too. More screen time, notifications she'd swipe away quickly. Once I walked past her while she was texting and caught a brief smile on her face, one of those unconscious, genuine ones. I asked what was funny, and she just said it was a meme Maya sent her. It wasn't. Maya would later tell me she hadn't spoken to Isabel in weeks. There were longer sessions at the gym now. 2 hours, sometimes 3, followed by smoothie runs, or quick coffees that stretched into late afternoons. She started keeping her phone on silent during dinner. Once or twice, she moved to another room to take a call, laughing softly behind closed doors. I should have asked more questions. Pressed her. I didn't. Part of me didn't want to seem jealous. Another part of me didn't want to hear the answer. I'd spent so long believing in the strength of what we had that I couldn't imagine it unraveling in real time. It was Leah, my cousin, who saw it first. She and Isabel had always gotten along, ever since Leah moved to Portland for law school and started visiting more often. One evening after dinner, Leah pulled me aside and said, "I don't want to interfere, but something feels off. She talks about this Drew guy like she's already written you out of the picture." I told her she was being dramatic. I wanted her to be wrong. She wasn't. I tried reconnecting with Isabel in small ways. Weekend plans, movie nights, breakfast, in bed. She always had an excuse. Her schedule was packed. She needed to center herself more. "I need space to figure out who I am again," she said one night, eyes on her phone. Still, I didn't confront her. Instead, I doubled down on planning the anniversary trip, pouring every ounce of effort into making it perfect. I told myself, this was just a rough patch, that once we were away together, without the routines and obligations of our daily life, things would reset. I believed that if I gave her something beautiful enough, thoughtful enough, she'd remember. She'd look at me and see the man she chose 12 years ago. The man who built a life with her, not beside her. But what I didn't understand then, and what I'd come to learn the hard way, is that people don't forget who you are. They forget who they told themselves you were supposed to become. And when the image doesn't match the fantasy, they start rewriting the story without you. The morning of our anniversary trip began like any other. Overcast skies, the smell of rain soaking into the city, a familiar quiet in the house as I zipped our luggage and triple-checked the passports. I'd even made coffee, left it on the nightstand for her with a note. "Can't wait to see this world with you." She didn't come downstairs until nearly 40 minutes later. I heard her heels before I saw her. The sharp, deliberate sound they made on the hardwood floors. Not sneakers. Not the usual travel flats, heels. That was the first thing that didn't make sense. Then I saw her. Isabel stood at the base of the stairs, dressed like she was heading to a fashion shoot, not a three-country trek through Northern Europe. A sleek, camel coat, oversized sunglasses, lips painted a shade darker than I'd seen in months. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't even pretending. Behind her, pulling a carbon fiber suitcase that wasn't ours, was Drew. He looked almost comically out of place in our house. Designer joggers, collared jacket, and that cocky confidence people wear when they're used to walking through the world untouched. I expected surprise, guilt, even awkwardness, but Drew just looked at me like this was the inevitable outcome of a story he'd already read. "Morning," he said, like we were roommates, like I hadn't spent the last 6 months planning a trip for two. I stood there, still holding our travel folder, reservations, printed itineraries, backup copies of every confirmation. I looked at Isabel. "I figured we'd leave around 8. Traffic to the airport's a mess today." She didn't move. "I'm still going," she said, voice level, as if that was a kindness. "But not with you." There was a pause. One of those strange silences where the world narrows into focus. The whir of the fridge, a dog barking 2 streets away, my own heartbeat in my ears. "Come again," I said, though I'd already heard her. She exhaled, like I was making this harder than it needed to be. "Noah, we've been disconnected for a long time. You don't see it, but I do. We're not the same people anymore. You're comfortable, safe. But you don't challenge me. You don't make me feel alive." She glanced at Drew, who said nothing, just shifted his weight and smiled slightly. "You've been working all these hours chasing control," she continued, "and I've been waking up every day wondering what I'm even doing in this life we built." "This trip was supposed to change that," I said, still trying to catch up, still clutching the folder like it meant something. She shook her head. "This trip was your idea of romance. Schedules, reservations, a checklist of good intentions. But Drew understands spontaneity, adventure." I actually laughed, couldn't help it. "So you're taking my anniversary trip with your personal trainer?" "I deserve to be happy," she said, as if that answered everything. "You do," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "But happiness built on betrayal is just regret with a time delay." She blinked. Drew frowned, like the word betrayal had rubbed against his image. "I already booked him a ticket," she added. "Same flight." Of course she had. She wasn't improvising this, she'd planned it. Coordinated the whole thing behind my back while I was working late, building a life she'd decided to exit. I handed her the travel folder. "Here. All the info's in there." She took it like it was her right. Didn't say thank you, didn't even look at me. And then she turned and walked out the door with him. Just like that. They headed down the steps toward a waiting car, the one I'd called the night before thinking we'd ride together. Drew slid an arm around her waist like they were boarding a honeymoon flight. I stood in the foyer and didn't move. I waited until I heard the door click shut behind them, then until the sound of their laughter faded beneath the engine starting. That's when it hit me. Not anger, not even pain. Clarity. Cold, clean clarity. She thought she was stealing something from me, the trip, the story, the upper hand. What she didn't know, what neither of them had considered, was that this wasn't just a romantic getaway. It was a system, a network, a structure I had built with the same precision I brought to every cybersecurity project I'd ever managed. Every hotel, every dinner, every ticket, every booking, locked behind digital authentication protocols she didn't understand. This wasn't a vacation. It was a test, and she'd just failed it in spectacular fashion. I went upstairs, changed my shirt, poured the coffee she left untouched, and opened my laptop. Within minutes, I was already making adjustments, reassigning, rerouting, reclaiming. They thought they were stepping into a fantasy. They had no idea the story they were in had just changed genres, from romance to retribution. By the time their Uber turned the corner, I was already logged into My travel control panel. Years of working in cybersecurity had taught me one thing above all: never build anything without contingency. And I hadn't. Everything about the trip had been routed through my professional infrastructure. I'd used Whitman Digital's encrypted booking service, a system we built for high-profile clients who valued privacy and control. That meant every hotel reservation, every dinner confirmation, every private car service, museum pass, and airline ticket was linked to my business account, my biometric ID, and my backup authentication device. The folders I handed Isabel? They were real, visually. But access to the trip wasn't paper. It was protocol. I opened the dashboard. The screen came, alive with dashboards and trip segments. Hotel in Reykjavik, cancelled. Dinner at Matura Drykur, cancelled. Boat tour in Tromsø, reassigned. Every service was tied to my personal credentials. Isabel and Drew could hold that itinerary all they wanted, but without me, they'd find closed doors and polite refusals. They thought they were taking my gift. In truth, they were walking into a blueprint that didn't recognize them. Next, I rerouted my own flight. There was a second option leaving 5 hours later through Amsterdam. I'd booked it weeks earlier as a failsafe. Travel logistics are unpredictable, and I hate scrambling. I confirmed it, upgraded my seat, and selected vegetarian meals for 2. Then I picked up my phone. Leah answered on the second ring. "I'm in," she said before I could say anything. "You're sure? I've got my passport and 2 weeks of vacation I haven't used. Send me the ticket." I smiled. Leah had always been the closest thing I had to family. Smart, grounded, sharp as hell. She'd sensed what was happening long before I was ready to admit it. And she wasn't just tagging along. She was bearing witness. I sent her the flight info and turned my attention to the finances. Isabel had access to our joint card, one we used for personal expenses. I logged in, reviewed the activity. The last few weeks were full of red flags: boutique athletic wear, upscale juice bars, reservations at restaurants I'd never heard of. I froze the card, transferred our liquid funds into a protected business, escrow, adjusted all automatic withdrawals to route through a new account I'd opened the month before. Then I contacted my firm's bank to remove Isabel as an authorized user on anything related to the company. By lunch, she would be locked out of every account, every point of access. Not because I was trying to punish her, but because I was protecting the thing I'd built. After that, I reached out to the travel concierge team, told them to expect impersonation attempts, authorized only biometric verification from my phone. Any other access attempt was to be flagged and logged. Wasn't angry. I wasn't spiraling. I was just precise, focused. Years of working in digital defense had conditioned me to respond to breach attempts with discipline, not drama. This wasn't different. It wasn't about Isabel anymore. It was about boundaries, ownership, identity. Packed light, just one carry-on, threw in some weatherproof gear, a paperback I'd been meaning to finish, and the old passport holder Isabel had given me our first year together. I kept it, not as a symbol of what we had, but as proof that even broken things can hold something useful. By the time I arrived at the airport, I was in a different headspace, detached, calm. Leah met me at the gate with a coffee and a grin. "So, we're doing this?" "We are." "Think she's figured it out yet?" I shrugged. "She will, eventually." And she did. Mid-flight, my phone buzzed. A message from Isabel. "There's something wrong with the hotel. They won't let us check in. Call me." I didn't. Instead, I put my phone on airplane mode, leaned back in my seat, and watched the clouds shift outside the window. They thought they'd stolen something valuable. What they didn't realize was they were holding the wrapping paper while I kept the actual gift. Control isn't loud. It's not vengeance or shouting or slamming doors. It's measured, silent, strategic. And in that silence, for the first time in years, I could finally hear myself think. The first real fallout came 12 hours later, while Leah and I were walking through a quiet corner of the Jordaan district in Amsterdam. The city was waking up slowly. bakeries letting out the scent of fresh bread, bicycles clinking over cobblestones, tourists snapping their first photos of the day. My phone buzzed again. Isabel, second missed call. I ignored it. Then came the texts. Noah, the hotel says the booking is invalid. They're asking for ID that matches the reservation. Please call. A woman at the front desk said they flagged the reservation due to possible fraud. Drew is furious. That one made me smile a little. Of course he was. What Isabel didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that I'd requested extra security protocols on all bookings. After all, these were high-tier accommodations, hotels used to handling VIP clients, many of whom preferred privacy and verification layers. Drew's name wasn't on anything. Neither was Isabel's. There was no record of their legitimacy, and then came the kicker. Later that afternoon, while Leah and I were sipping coffee near a canal, my second phone buzzed. Not many people had the number. This one was a secure line I used for business and banking. The caller ID read, International Alerts, Whitman Digital. I picked up. Noah Whitman? Yes. This is Angela from Global Risk Control. Contracted through your Amsterdam security node. We've received a notice that one of your hotel bookings has triggered a fraud escalation. The secondary party, one Drew Carrington, attempted to present falsified ID credentials in Reykjavik. The staff contacted local authorities. We've initiated lockdown on all affiliated travel reservations. I took a sip of my coffee. Thank you. Please continue to monitor. Understood. Should we also flag the card activity on the cancelled restaurant reservations? There was an attempt to charge over 2,000 euros at a luxury spa under your company's travel account. Decline all charges, mark them as unauthorized. Noted. I hung up and looked over at Leah. She raised an eyebrow. They just tried to use my travel card in Iceland. With fake ID. She whistled. Wow. Bold move for a guy with a history. Yes, history. Because what I hadn't told Isabel, and what she certainly hadn't known, was that Drew Carrington had a past. About a month before the trip, something about him had started bothering me. The casual way Isabel talked about him, the quiet hints of manipulation in her language. I'd run a discreet background check. It was subtle at first. Dropped charges, unpaid debts. But then I found the real file. Drew had been involved in a wire fraud case 5 years ago under a different company name. He'd set up a shell fitness brand to launder money for a partner who'd since disappeared. The case was buried, settled quietly, but the documents were there. I kept copies. And now he was trying to repeat history, only this time with my money, my booking, my wife. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a picture message from Isabel. It was her standing in the hotel lobby looking disheveled, flanked by 2 security guards. Behind her, Drew was on the phone, clearly agitated. The caption read, "This is humiliating. Fix this." Didn't reply. By the time she called again, voice trembling, her tone no longer defensive but panicked, I finally picked up. Noah. Yes? They're saying we can't stay. That our names aren't on anything. Drew's card isn't working either. We tried booking something else, but most places are full. It's tourist season. That it is, I said. Please. Just help me get through this. Then we can talk when I'm back. I think you've misunderstood the situation, I said calmly. I'm not here to fix things. I'm here to watch things correct themselves. She went quiet. Then slowly. Is this revenge? No. This is reality. For once, you're seeing the version of the world you created. Except now it's not being softened by me. There was another silence then. Drew says this is illegal, that you can't. Drew should stop giving legal advice, considering his record. Did you know about the fraud charges? She didn't answer. And by the way, the funds used to attempt that spa charge were tied to my business travel account, which is federally protected. So if he wants to keep playing this game in Europe, I'm sure the local police would love to hear from him again. Noah, you can't just leave us stranded in a foreign country. I didn't. You stranded yourselves. I planned a trip. You hijacked it. All I did was pull back what was mine. I ended the call. Leah, who had listened quietly, gave a low whistle. That's got to sting. She'll be fine, I said. She's resourceful when she needs to be, or she used to be before Drew. That night, news of the incident started circulating on travel forums. A wellness influencer detained for possible fraud, a client dispute involving luxury travel, and identity misrepresentation. Someone even posted photos from the lobby. The story was spreading, not viral, but visible enough. Isabel had always cared about appearances, about perception. The irony was poetic. She chased a new image so hard that she ended up becoming a cautionary tale in someone else's narrative. And me? I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear, because social justice isn't always a courtroom or a headline. Sometimes it's just letting people face the mirror they've spent years avoiding, and refusing to be the one who keeps cleaning it for them. By the time Leah and I arrived in Florence 2 days later, the shift had already begun, not just in logistics or location, but inside me. Something fundamental had realigned. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't operating from reaction. I was leading, not chasing explanations or approval, but reclaiming space I didn't even realize I'd given away. We checked into a small hotel overlooking the Arno River. Nothing flashy, just elegant, warm, and quiet. The kind of place where the staff remembers your name without overstepping. While Leah went to explore the Uffizi, I sat at the writing desk in our suite and opened my laptop. The first email I sent was to someone I should have contacted long. Robert Ellison, my attorney. Sharp, discreet, and very good at seeing the angles most people miss. I'd first helped him with a security breach years ago, locking down his firm's client data. He'd always told me, if you ever need someone in your corner, call. Now I did. His response came in 20 minutes flat. I'm sorry to hear what's happened, Noah. If it's time, we'll do this right. Are we pursuing amicable or strategic? Strategic, I typed back. Understood. Let's talk assets, misconduct, and exposure control. I'll need documentation. I had it. Months of credit card statements showing charges Isabel couldn't explain. Hotel bookings on nights she claimed to be at networking events. Payments to Drew marked as consulting, despite him never being officially involved in her nonprofit. It wasn't just betrayal. It was misuse of funds, likely even tax-deductible fraud. Robert called it a pattern of marital dissipation, when one partner uses joint resources for personal benefit in a way that intentionally undermines the marital estate. California courts frown on that. Next, I called the accountant I trusted, Andrea, who had overseen Whitman Digital's financial growth for years. Calm, analytical, precise. I asked her for a full audit of every joint account, every business-linked expense that overlapped with Isabel's personal spending. She didn't even hesitate. You want the paper trail, Noah? I'll give you the whole forest. Within 24 hours, we had enough to build a clear narrative. Isabel had diverted over $38,000 in joint resources toward Drew-related activity in under 8 months. Spa packages, flight upgrades, boutique gym memberships, luxury Airbnb rentals. In cities she claimed she was visiting for gallery conferences. We weren't just looking at infidelity anymore. We were looking at grounds for financial restitution. The next step was practical, but just as symbolic. I called a locksmith. Hi, this is Noah Whitman. I'd like all the exterior locks changed on my property in Northwest Portland. Today, if possible. The man asked if I was locked out. No, I said. I'm locking someone else out. By the time Isabel returned to the U.S., the house was no longer accessible. Her keycards had been deactivated, her codes changed, her name removed from the security system. A package was waiting for her. A formal notice from Robert's office with the first draft of divorce papers, along with a detailed breakdown of contested assets. She called, of course, 6 times. Left voicemails ranging from confused to furious, to pleading. I listened to none of them. There was nothing to clarify. What surprised me wasn't how quickly the legal case took shape, but how little emotional resistance I had left. There was a time when I would have agonized over what to say. when I would have stayed up at night wondering what part of this was my fault, what part of her heart I had failed to hold. But standing there in Florence, looking out at the golden glow over the Ponte Vecchio, I realized I no longer wanted an explanation. I didn't need an apology. I'd spent so many years trying to hold together something that had long since unraveled, stitching up the fabric of a relationship with threads of denial, hope, and nostalgia. But now the weight was gone. Leah returned from the gallery with gelato and a grin. "You look lighter." "I am." We spent the rest of the day wandering through alleyways, watching artists sketch tourists, sharing long, quiet moments that felt more intimate than any dinner party Isabel had ever dragged me to. The next morning I got a call from Robert. "Quick update. Your motion to freeze joint assets was approved. Isabel has limited access to any shared accounts until we resolve the division. Based on the records, she'll have a tough time arguing for equal distribution." I thanked him. Not because I was happy to win, but because it was time to stop losing. This wasn't revenge, this wasn't cruelty. This was preservation. And if Isabel wanted to rebuild her life, she'd have to do it the way I'd done mine. From the ground up, without shortcuts, without someone else's name on the title. 3 months after filing the divorce papers, I returned to Florence not to reclaim something but to honor what I'd found. Peace, strangely enough, didn't come like I expected. It didn't feel triumphant or cinematic. It felt quiet, subtle, like the absence of static in the background. I'd sold the Portland house a month earlier. Too many echoes in its walls. Every corner held a version of me that no longer existed. Waiting, compromising, trying. I didn't want to live alongside ghosts. Instead, I bought a small apartment tucked above a bookstore near Piazza della Repubblica. 2 bedrooms, warm brick walls, tall windows that let the morning spill in like golden ink. Whitman Digital ran smoother than ever. I trimmed the client list, focused only on projects that aligned with my values, and started mentoring young cybersecurity analysts through a fellowship program Leah helped me design. It felt honest, something built from integrity, not ego. Something Isabel would have dismissed as too small, but that made me feel expansive. Leah visited often. We had a standing tradition now. Every Thursday evening we'd meet for dinner at a family-run trattoria down the street. The owner, Giacomo, made the best mushroom risotto in the city and always saved us a corner table. We talked about law, literature, and life with a kind of ease that required no performance. Once, after dinner, she asked, "Do you miss her?" It took me a moment to answer. "I miss who I thought she was," I said. "But that person never really existed. I think I was just in love with an idea. It wasn't bitterness, it was clarity." Isabel had moved to Los Angeles, I'd heard. She was working at a new gallery, trying to revive the nonprofit under a different name. The whispers from our mutual friends said she was struggling, that her reputation had taken a hit after some of the financial mismanagement came to light, that she'd distanced herself from Drew, who, as it turned out, had returned to Miami and was trying to rebrand as a life coach. She texted me once, just a single sentence, "I hope you're happy." I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, but because I was. Happiness wasn't a grand moment or a perfect relationship. It was waking up in the morning and not having to explain myself to anyone. It was reading on my terrace without wondering who was hiding something. It was laughing over dinner without bracing for the next guilt-laced complaint. I wasn't waiting for closure. I had it. And that was the real ending, not the one wrapped in drama or exposed betrayal, but the one where you realize the story was never about what you lost. It was always about what you gained once the noise fell away. Freedom, self-respect, stillness, the things no one can steal when you've built them into who you are. What happened between Isabel and me wasn't just the story of a failed marriage. It was a case study in boundaries, blind spots, and the quiet damage done when one person gives everything while the other simply takes. As a cybersecurity consultant, I've spent years building systems that protect people from unseen threats. But the truth is, our personal lives need the same vigilance. Not just firewalls for our data, but boundaries for our energy, our time, our trust. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Loyalty means nothing if it's not mutual. You can't fix someone's restlessness with more effort. And you should never have to lose yourself to keep someone else from leaving. Sometimes the greatest form of justice isn't revenge. It's choosing not to collapse. It's rebuilding without bitterness. It's becoming someone who doesn't need to be rescued, because you've already rescued yourself. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been blindsided by someone you trusted? What helped you heal? If this story moved you, consider subscribing for more narratives where hard truths lead to stronger lives. And if nothing else, share this with someone who might need to hear that peace is possible, even after the storm.